Hello YouTube, welcome back. Welcome to my second video. This is my first video that's going to include instruction, and today we are going to be talking about line work and what is important with line work, what's going to hold up, and different variables of line work, and when you go to get an apprenticeship, what your instructor is going to be looking at, or who you are looking to apprentice under, what they're going to be looking at to see what you're talking about, and what other people look at whenever they're looking at your stuff to see if you're doing clean tattoos and clean art. It all is relative. So if this is my first video that you've seen, my name is Colt. I've been tattooing a little over 13 years, and I've owned my own shop for 5, and I'm a busy tattooer, but I want to teach others, and I have instructed others. I have an apprentice now, and I've had other apprentices that were successful, and they're good tattooers. And my new apprentice has been tattooing a few months, and she's a good tattooer. First foundation is important is line work, and then goes on to shading after that, but that will be another video in the future. So without further ado, let's get into it. This lesson is on line work, and we are going to be going over lines, how they describe objects, and what the different lines mean, the different lines that you can use in tattoo design. A lot of different lines that you can use depending on what kind of style tattoo you're looking to describe and tattoo style you're trying to do. And that can differentiate the difference between the different styles a lot. The first style we're going to kind of talk about, and that'll be a completely different video, is traditional tattoos. And traditional tattoos usually have one line weight, and it's usually thicker lines. So I'm going to be using it's a fine point Sharpie, but this is usually the thicker of the Sharpie, and leaves quite a bit thicker line overall. And if this was an actual tattoo needle, this would probably be similar to a 7 or 9 or 11 round tattoo needle. Next is going to be the thinner line. This is also a Sharpie, but this is a fine point, ultra fine point Sharpie. And you can see the difference in those two line weights right off the bat. So those are both solid lines. Definitely thicker, thinner. If you're going traditional, you're probably going to be sticking to this thicker line for your whole design. There's not a lot of differentiation in the line weights in traditional tattoos. You're getting into neo-traditional, you're going to be using thicker and thinner lines. Also, there's dotted lines. Or maybe just dots. And these can be used to describe different objects that you're trying to draw, whatever the subject matter may be. Also, we have, those are all solid black lines or dots. We also have, this is a gray marker, and you can use any gray marker. You can use the cheap ones that, Crayola provides, or whatever, or, whatever your art store has in the clearance aisle. This doesn't have to be. I've actually got these out of clearance aisle. They're Winsor Newton, but they can be anything. And this one is a warm gray. But you can see that the difference in the warm gray and the black. You know, the black is a lot more bolder, even though it's a thinner line. It's definitely bolder overall. And then I'm going to be using a cool gray too. And hopefully you can see that on the camera, but that's definitely, you know, even more difference. And all these are to build contrast, and throughout this whole deal you're going to be trying to, you know, tattoos and what stands out or what's important is usually contrast in the tattoo. You know, light to dark is usually the biggest contrast. Heavy line weight to thinner line weight, there's a contrast. Heavy line weight to, you know, darker or thinner. All these things build contrast. These are both grays, but you also have color contrast too, you know. You can use a color marker, and then that stands out different than black also. So all these things together, you know, you can build different contrasts and use these contrasts to describe objects. How to use these different line weights and what they mean in a couple different scenarios. One being something that I use quite a bit. I live near the mountains, and one tattoo design I use quite a bit are mountain tattoos. I do a lot of mountain tattoos. So I'm going to go with my cool gray since it seems to be the lightest, and I'm going to build a quick design with that and kind of show you how to use all these different line weights and what they mean. So with this first one, I'm going to be doing just a simple mountain range that I do quite a bit and make it up. So usually mountains have, you know, I like to do odd numbers all the time, but you know, one mountain peak in the middle, kind of a line that gives that mountain some kind of form. Usually there's a shadow side and a light side. And then I'm going to do two other mountain peaks, kind of the background, whatever these are, on either side. We're going to probably do 5 just so I can show all the different line weights overall. And I'm building this up with a light sketch, and I'm going to work into a darker so that you can see what's going on. And you'll see as build, you know, my drawing that I'll go darker, and some of that darker stuff is going to come forward more. And this is actually something I learned from watching Bob Ross videos. If you don't know who Bob Ross is, he's a guy that used to do all kinds of landscape paintings, and people just used to love watching his videos and watching him do landscapes. But with this mountain, whenever you're looking at mountains off in the distance, if you live near mountains or anything, there's something with mountains especially, or anything that's in the distance, as it gets further away, things get a little bit lighter, and that's called atmospheric perspective. And what that means is basically there's more atmosphere between you and whatever object is. The further it gets away, there's basically more air between you, and that causes whatever object that's the furthest away to be a little bit fuzzier as it gets further off in the distance. And it's basically just more air between you, or more atmosphere between you and that object. So this mountain here in the front, I want that to come forward more than these mountains in the back, and I'm going to layer these mountains to kind of show that atmospheric perspective. So this first mountain I'm going to actually line it with the thicker liner, the fine point, but again, that's the heaviest line weight that I have. And they're called line weights as they get thicker, you know, that's just used to describe the different sizes of the lines. So this first mountain, I'm just making this mountain up. I'm not using really any reference or anything, but this mountain is going to be the closest to me. Right? Then I'm going to go through and I'm going to line these two further back with a different line weight, this ultra fine point, right? Because I want these mountains to be further back in my perspective. You can already see the difference in that, you know, this, even though lines don't actually have, or mountains don't actually have lines around them, people don't have lines around them or anything, we're using lines to describe these objects. Now you can see the difference in these mountains, you know. This one looks like it's further back. I'll actually use this other cool gray so you can see this one a little bit, or the warm gray. You'll be able to see that a little more. It just brings it forward a little bit more. But you can kind of see this difference already as everything develops. This mountain is closer to you than this mountain. This mountain is even further. And I'll put up a picture reference of real mountains so you can kind of see more what I'm talking about with the atmospheric perspective and how that happens in real life. Then we'll go over this one more time. That would be even further back, or if you had a little mountain back here in the back, you know, you can see the difference as those mountains get further back. And I'm not going to do a bunch of shading in this or anything, but I'll kind of just do a quick shading. We're not going to talk too much about form shading or anything in this one, but just to give you more of a perspective, we'll put some sort of shading in this. I'm thinking about my light source actually being on my left side, so I'm just going to shade in the right side of this mountain so you can And then also, as the mountain gets closest to you, you're going to see more details into it. Maybe you'd see some trees, something like that, you know. And the mountains that get further away, you're not going to be able to see little details like trees and animals running around on it, you know. The little valleys and hills, you know. You'll be able to see more valleys and hills on this one. And the details get smaller as they go back too, whatever they are. So I'm using this ultra fine again to. I wish I had done this mountain and, you know, a dotted, different stuff like that. Say if you're going to put like a sun behind these mountains, you can make that dotted, and that would even push that object further back too. But hopefully you guys understand what I'm talking about with this. And if not, feel free to ask any questions inside the comments, and I'll try and answer those for you. But hopefully you can see what I'm talking about with that, you know. And if we were going to put some kind of a sun, that would be even further back, you know. This is really a rudimentary drawing, rough sketch and such, but hopefully you can tell what's going on with all that, even though it's rough. There's different elements to sketching and such, but I think that kind of describes what I'm talking about. And I'm going to show you one more example with something that's more tattooable. I mean, I do mountain tattoos all the time, not this simple. Usually I'm doing shading from multiple sides and giving these mountains more form, but one more example I'd like to do is something that's one of the first things I learned in tattooing is cherry blossom flower. I like to lay out my cherry blossoms. Drawing really light again. And then I'm going to put in a couple leaves here. And this is super rough. But also, again, I like to use odd numbers in everything I do. Even though this is more of a traditional cherry blossom, you'll see it as it develops. I'm going to use a couple different line weights again so I can describe what's going on more here. So I'm drawing the petals on the cherry blossom now. And I have a cherry blossom tattooed on my hand. I haven't seen it, but it's one of the first flowers I like to learn how to draw. Teaches you how to lay out. And I will be doing a separate lesson on how to draw cherry blossoms in the near future, so stick around for that. And I will be going over several flowers because I like to draw flowers, and a lot of people like flowers, and it's my bread and butter. I make a lot of money drawing flowers and tattooing them, so I think they're good to learn. So those are the petals of your cherry blossom, right? And then we're going to go in and put these little fine details. It's the center of cherry blossom, because I don't want this to be as bold in the center. I'm going with a thinner line. Right? And now I'm going to draw these outside leaves with this thinner line too, because I want this cherry blossom to stand out in front of everything. If I was doing a full traditional tattoo, you could do everything in the same line weight, but I'm trying to show the difference in the line weights with this. So I'm going to be doing this with a thinner one. Now if I put any inner details in these middle leaves, it's just going to kind of add shape to the petals themselves, you know. But they still hold form with the heavier line weight around the outside. And then maybe add some form to these kind of. But you can kind of see how the flower is bolder and stands out even in front of the leaves. So these leaves already fall back without doing a heavier shading. They just fall back with doing a thinner line work overall, you know. Sets them a little further back in the design. You can see the flower is much bolder. And then I even have these other smaller leaves in the back that I want, you know, to be even further back. But you can see how I did that just with, you know, different colors. So hopefully that made some sense. And if anything didn't make sense, ask me some questions and we'll end up doing another video. Till next time, if you guys have any questions, probably the next videos I'll be doing, besides some time lapses and stuff, my next instructional video will probably be shading and the different types of shading and form shading. And you can also go with heavier lines. You can, if you have another one of these Sharpies that's not a fine point, or, bolder, there's always that. You could use, there's that one I used right on the tip, but you could use it on its side, and then you have an extra line weight, that's heavier. There's a lot of different ways to differentiate line weight and stuff, and it applies to the same thing. The heavier you go with the line weight, at least in traditional and neo-traditional, usually the closer an object is to you. So hopefully that made sense. If didn't, ask questions. If this is my first video that you've seen, subscribe, like it. It helps boost me in the algorithm, and I appreciate you guys watching it if you made it this far. Thank you guys, and have a great day.